and welcome to the lecture on writing the proposal step by step. In this lecture, I'm going to be giving an overview of the different parts of the proposal for the final research project. I'll be walking you through how each part of the proposal works and how it connects to the final research project that you're going to be completing throughout the rest of the semester. There are also examples embedded within this lecture that show you the different parts so that way you can know how to structure your essay. So let's get started by looking at the first slide. Before you start writing the proposal, it's very important that you've finalized your topic. Remember that our focus for the rest of the semester is on how pop culture often has social issues embedded in it, because it is a representation of the culture at large. So even though pop culture is focused on pleasure and on broad common experiences across differences, it still reproduces some of the problems in culture, or it can imagine possible solutions to it. So pop culture becomes a serious research topic then when we identify those social issues and explore how and why pop culture intersects with them. Hopefully, by this point, you have a topic that you've already worked through in terms of the sources and the discussion board for the working thesis sentences. But remember that our Week 2 look at media literacy is asking you to think about your own experiences when examining media closely and then drawing conclusions based on those experiences. So going forward, what you want to write about in the proposal is this set topic for the rest of the semester, and I really want to make sure that you've picked one that you're committed to writing about. You should have a social issue at this point that really matters to you and that you feel confident writing about, and you should have a specific pop culture form that you have some experience with or that you want to learn more about. Please remember that if you have not talked with me about the research topic at this point, it's a good time for you before you start drafting that proposal essay to just confirm with me whether or not the topic that you've chosen is going to work. So let's start with the different parts of the proposal now. The introduction. You may want to go back and review the proposal paper assignment sheet. And remember that the purpose of the proposal is to explain your research topic, your reasons for this topic, and your potential questions and a working thesis. The introduction of the proposal paper is going to describe your research paper and your audience. It should state your topic and the reasons for your choices. And this is just a very kind of generic fill-in-the-blank way that you could think through this. I chose to examine blank. That's describing what you're looking at. I chose this topic because you're going to have the why. Now you'll remember this should seem very similar to something that I've already asked you to post in the discussion board when you were doing your working thesis sentences. You can use the writing from that discussion board, that first paragraph that you used, and include that in probably a revised form in the introduction to your proposal paper. Any writing that we do this semester, you can build on it in blocks like that where you're kind of moving it forward, revising it, making it fit the new assignment, and continuing to use that writing that you've already done. So as you extend that writing in the introduction, you can also include personal reflection in this section, as long as it relates to your topic. You also might mention professional reasons that you've chosen that particular topic. You could say why the topic interests you in terms of a future job or hobbies that you currently have, or you could provide any background or experience that you already have on this topic. You should also describe why you think others might be interested in the topic. Who is your potential audience? The introduction should contain this audience reference, and I want you to be really specific about who you think would read your project and who you want to learn from it. So now let's look at an example for the introduction, which again is going to focus on the purpose and the audience for the final research project. Remember that any examples I give you are likely going to be shorter than what you'll actually write for your paper. I've tried to condense it down and just show you the bare structure of what should go in each section of the proposal, and you'll probably have more information that you want to add to yours. So let's look at the sections that I've broken out for you here. For my final research project, I want to examine the topic of economics in film. So the topic here is named. You want to make sure in the proposal that you're explaining exactly what your research is. That way I can know and your readers can know exactly what it is that your purpose is going to be about and what your thesis is going to be about. And you need to state that topic very clearly at the beginning of the introduction. Then I'm going to move into some personal and professional reasons for doing this research project. So you see here I name being interested in the topic after the recession. That's personal background for why I might write this paper. Then noticing films that I've seen, like The Big Short that came out in 2015, that also caught my attention, so maybe I would want to write about those financial circumstances. And then finally, a more professional gauged reason here, planning to major in finance, so examining how the career is portrayed in pop culture. Still a personal reason, but it gives a professional angle to it. So all of those reasons then are why I picked that topic. That's why I want to look at economics in film. So now I'm going to move into the second paragraph here, and I'm going to talk more generally about the way that films are operating in pop culture regarding economics. So movies like The Big Short are trying to educate their viewers about how the financial sector caused the housing market crash and led to the recession, but they are also using real economic hardship as entertainment. So here you get a little hint of argument here, starting in this paragraph, even though I don't have my clear thesis, which will come later in the proposal, but I'm still positioning that argument as reasons for why I wanted to do the research. Here's the gesture at audience coming next. I think more people need to pay attention to this, right? This issue of how finances are being used as entertainment. And I hope my research will reach an audience of younger people that like movies but don't realize how economics are being manipulated in films. So again, the argument is embedded in these suggestions or these reasons for research, but I haven't come right out and said exactly what it is yet, because my focus is on why I'm doing the research and who my audience is. And I'm not quite ready yet to state outright what that argument is going to be. I'm building up to it in the introduction. So again, the introduction is going to frame the topic, give personal, professional reasons for why you want to research that topic, and then explain who you are targeting with your research. Who do you want to learn from it? Who do you want to think about when you're writing this paper? Who are you writing it for? So all of these things should be included in the introduction. If you chose to do a non-traditional proposal, meaning that you're not writing an essay, but you're actually creating the audio-visual or the graphic, then you're going to really be including the exact same information about purpose and audience in your introduction. But of course, your introduction isn't going to look the same way that it would in a traditional essay. So in the audio-visual style, what you're going to do is you're going to record a section at the beginning that will just be yourself speaking and saying things like the title of your topic. You're going to describe your personal and professional reasons why you chose that topic, and you're going to describe your potential audience. So again, the exact same information, but rather than writing through it, you're going to speak through it. You do need to note that the recording has to be coherent and organized so that your information is clear. When I'm listening or viewing your video, I should be able to hear all of the things that I just mentioned as part of your first part of the proposal. So it should come at the beginning and it needs to be very clearly defined. So I am going to ask that you turn in a set of informal notes just so I make sure I don't miss anything that you're talking about. You can think of those as talking points. It does not have to be complete sentences. It does not need to be organized in terms of an essay style. It just needs to be bullet points so that I know that you have stated everything and I don't overlook anything that you want me to hear. Now, if you're doing the graphic, of course, it's going to be more visual. In this case, you're going to use images and perhaps keywords that will create the same sense of purpose and audience. So you're going to include, again, the title of your topic, and then images are words that represent personal and professional reasons why you chose that topic. You are also going to use images and words that describe your potential audience. So the way that you do that is completely up to you, but the images need to convey what you mean. And you are going to be asked to turn in a set of informal notes explaining your meaning. So you can think of those notes as a key to the images. So just like when you're reading a map, you have a key or a legend that explains what the symbols on the map means, your notes are going to be that explanation. So again, it's not written out in complete sentences, but you might have something like the image of the tree represents the growth that I want to find in this particular area. The image of the apple represents the food market that I'm going to be investigating and the origins of food processing. So you need to be able to decipher in those notes, if it's not clear within the graphic itself, what those images represent. So just keep that in mind, that in both cases, for the audiovisual and the graphic, you're still going to be including information about purpose and about audience, but you're going to also have to be thinking about how can I make sure that those points of information are conveyed coherently to my audience. So you're composing in the same way that you compose a traditional essay, but you're having to put out a product that is different than that essay. So you have to think through the same, different types of strategies that you would be using in order to communicate. So keep those things in mind as you're starting to think through which type of proposal you're going to be creating. Now let's move on to the body of the proposal. The body should explain your research method and give a project overview. So I want you to think about your current knowledge of the topic and what you think your research will uncover. Now, it's important to understand that for the proposal, saying "I'm not sure" is not an option. The goal of the proposal is to describe what your final project will look like, which means you need to have concrete details at this point about your expectations, even if they turn out to be wrong later. It is perfectly fine for you to speculate, for you to be investigative, for you to really just think through what you actually know and what you want to find out. And then if research proves you wrong, that's fine. You don't have to have all of the answers right now, but you do need to be thinking through what you want to talk about and what you anticipate happening for the final research project. So the body is going to look almost like an overview of what your final research project will be. One paragraph should describe what you do for each part of the final project: history, current trends, and the artifact rationale. So you may want to go back and review the research project overview assignment sheet for details on each of these sections. So when you start writing the body, you may have more than 3 paragraphs, one for each of these particular parts, and it's fine if you do. But each one of these parts should be present in some way in your proposal. So first you're going to look at the history. You're going to describe what you think the history of your whole topic is. What do you know about the history so far, or what do you think you will learn? And it is okay if you don't know much about your topic at this point. You need to just acknowledge that, and then you can speculate about what you think you will find. You're going to learn during the research process, so you don't have to have all that information right now. The proposal is just the place for you to describe your expectations and what you think you're going to learn. And you'll see how this works in the example that I have soon. For the current trends section, I'm asking you to describe what you think the trends are right now for both your social issue and the pop culture form together, your entire topic. So do not describe trends only for the social issue itself or only for the pop culture form. Remember that you want to describe your whole topic. As an example of this, if you're writing about gender in film, you wouldn't want to just talk about gender or just talk about film. You want to talk about your whole topic. And that's also true for the history section as well. You should also include in this section specific examples of pop culture that you will look at when you examine your social issue. You should name the shows, the films, the music, whatever form it is that you're looking at. Find examples that are current trends and name those. The more specific you can be, the better. Then you're going to look at the artifact rationale. Remember, as part of your project, you're going to create a visual or auditory artifact that will be embedded and included as part of your writing. That is your contribution to the conversation on the topic in addition to the research writing process. So for this proposal, you need to describe what type of artifact you want to create and why you are choosing this type rather than any other type. So remember, as you're writing through the body, overall the tone of the proposal is to be investigative. You do not have to have all of the answers, but you are going to convey what you think the answers will be. So you need to be specific. And let's look at an example to see what this looks like. The next couple of slides have broken down for you an example for each section of the body. First, we're going to start with the history. And I want you to notice how the history in this case is hypothetical and it may not even be accurate. That's okay. The proposal is describing your expectations before research. It's proposing what you think you're going to find. The final project will be where you describe what you actually found and support that with your quotes and your citations. But at this point, it's just speculation, but it should be grounded in some sense of reality, right? So thinking through what you already know about your topic, what you've experienced in pop culture, and then speculating and investigating what you think the history of the topic will be. So I have here an example of what if I don't know very much about my topic. Although I don't know much about the history of economics in film, I expect that most films do not deal with people struggling with poverty. So I'm going to explain very clearly that I have limited knowledge about the history of my topic, but I'm also going to still describe what I expect to find. So you'll see the difference here. I'm not saying I don't really know anything about the history, so I can't write this part of the paper. I'm saying I don't really know anything about the history, but I'm still going to tell you what I expect to find when I research the history portion. So make sure that you're doing the work of thinking through those expectations. Then I'm going to describe a method. I want to look at older classic films to see if they focused on rich or poor people and what types of stories were told. So this is the type of research I'm going to do. I'm going to look at specific older classic films and find out what's being said about them and how they were portraying different social classes and the economic struggles that they might have been having. So that's how I'm going to learn about the history, even though I don't know the history now. Then I have some more expectations. I expect that the focus is on a rags to riches type of story, where the main characters end up happy because this would be more entertaining for early film audiences. I don't think films would portray the struggles of poverty because this might be too depressing for viewers that are living in those circumstances, like during the 1930s Great Depression. So giving further expectations and my reasons for why I think that might be the case. That's going to be what comprises the history of your proposal. It's those expectations, those experiences that you might have had. If you've viewed older TV shows, you might know some of what was in the content. If you've listened to older music, you might know some of what is in the lyrics. But if you haven't, then you still need to do the work of writing through what you expect to find. So be really specific in the history section, and of course yours will probably be longer than this because you're going to be looking a little more in depth in my example. In the same way, if you're doing the non-traditional proposal, you're going to include the same information about history. So again, think about how you're going to represent history either through the audiovisual or through the graphic. If you're doing audiovisual, you're going to need to speak about your experience with your topic, describing to your audience and to your listener what experience you've had in the past, whether that's no experience or if you've had quite a bit of experience with your topic, and explain your expectations for what you hope to learn about the topic's history in particular. So make sure if you're speaking that you indicate, for the history portion, I want to look at these things so that you're cueing people with a verbal cue. That's your transition to helping them understand that now you're talking about that history section, your experience, your expectations, and then your method or focus for finding research. Make sure that you have a definite verbal cue, or if you're creating a video, you might use a title card to indicate that you're now talking about that particular area. For the graphic, you're going to have a visual that is distinctly separating the history section out from the rest of that visual. If you're doing a PowerPoint, this would be a separate slide. If you're doing one overall poster, you want to use the word history in a particular section that's maybe in a different font or a different color or is blocked out with lines in some way. So make sure that there's a distinct icon or some kind of separateness to that area, so that way the eye is drawn to the history portion and the things that are in that section are related to this topic. Again, you're going to be using images and words that represent those experiences and expectations, and images and words that represent your method for finding research. You'll also include, as I mentioned before for the introduction, a translation of those images in that key or legend that you're going to be turning in, that set of notes that'll decipher that symbolism in case it's not clear. Now, if you end up doing a PowerPoint slide, you may not have as many images when you're describing your research methods. And you can also, if you're doing a poster, use more words in that section than you do images. But you just want to make sure that it's coherent, that it's visually appealing, and that it makes sense to a viewer so that all the information that you need to include is coming across. In the current trends section, you're going to draw on your experiences of watching and listening to these pop culture forums and figure out what you think those current trends are. Now again, you may or may not be right once you do your research, and that's fine. But you need to be speculating about what you think those current trends are based on your personal experiences, and then develop some reasons for your research and your expectations. So let's look at the example. As more people from the middle class can afford to see movies, I think currently the movie trends try to show issues in economics that reflect those experiences. For example, films like The Big Short show how average American people struggled because of wealthy advisors' bad decisions. There are still rags to riches stories like Slumdog Millionaire, but I think these films are becoming more critical of how wealth and poverty are maintained. There are also more documentaries about issues related to economics, like Park Avenue, Money, Power, and the American Dream. I expect that this is a difference in how economics and wealth have been portrayed in the past. So I've already established in the past, I think the history is going to be that stories about wealth were more upbeat, right? That they were happy stories. And then I'm saying the current trend is, I don't think the stories have to be happy anymore. Right? The current trend is more people want to see their actual struggles portrayed in film rather than just being entertained. So I'm expecting that when I go into doing the current trend research, I'm going to still see that rags to riches story, but it's probably going to be more, there will be more films focused on hardship and struggle rather than just all happy narratives. So that would be the difference. I'm moving the proposal through the history into what my expectations are of the current trends. And notice how I've given multiple specific examples of films that I could look at for my research project. Now, I may come up with more of those later, and those might change. I might decide I don't want to look at documentaries, or I might just want to focus on American films, right? So there could be some shift between the proposal and the final project, but I've done the work now of bringing up specific examples of different types of films that I could look at to make this paper work. That's what you need to be doing in the current trends section, is thinking through what are specific examples that I could possibly use in the final essay. For the current trends section in the audio visual, you should be speaking about why you think current trends might have changed since the history portion. And if things haven't changed, why not? So again, you want to provide some kind of contrast to the history section. So where you might have had a title card, or you might have cued your your listener before in terms of saying this is the history section. Now you're going to cue them again saying, now I want to talk about current trends. Or you might have a current trends title card that comes in. And you're going to say, where before history had these things, or I was interested in investigating these things in the history section, now in current trends, I think that things might be different, or if things are the same, why are they the same? So you're also going to, in this section, describe multiple specific current examples of where you see your social issue at work in your pop culture form. So here's where you need to name names. You need to be saying movie titles, or TV show titles, or music artists, or lyrics, or pop icons, or whatever area that you're looking at. You're going to have specific current examples that you want to investigate and that you think are really representative of your particular topic. You also want to describe those expectations that you're going to find or that you expect to find happening in current culture. So thinking in terms of comparing the current trends to the history section and creating a sense of coherence throughout this audio recording, where you're going to be thinking, here's my introduction, now I've talked about history, now I'm going to talk about current trends, and then as we'll see, through the artifact and into the conclusion. So the structure of it is the exact same as the written proposal. You're just talking through it and thinking in terms of how to get your audience to listen to what you're saying rather than writing those things out. So make sure that the current trends is distinct from history in some way by cueing through audio cues or visual cues through a video. In the same way for the graphic, you're going to need that distinct area devoted to current trends. Again, different than the intro area, different than the history, some kind of different icon, font, slide, something that's representative of a separate section. And in the same way that you did in history, you're going to show images and words that represent current trends. They should be different than what you put in the history section. You should have some kind of idea of a transition. You could think again about using imagery like arrows. Maybe the history section is one area and you're going to draw an arrow that shows how things have evolved or changed into the current trends section. So moving the viewer's eye from one area to the next area to show that feeling of transition or movement. Or if you feel like things haven't changed enough, you might put an arrow with an X on it. These are just some examples to get you thinking. You can really do this however you want. But there should be this also representation of multiple current examples, just like in the audio visual. You're going to name names, you're going to be specific. You can use photos of current pop icons. You can use photos or images related to TV or film if that's your area, or music album covers if you're looking at lyrics, and bring in those things that you feel like are the current examples that best represent where your issue is today. So again, thinking in terms of expectations that you might find for what is happening in current culture. What do you think is really going on right now? So that current trend should be distinct from history. History is looking to the past, so that's going to be older examples and older things that you expect, and current trends is right now, what's immediate. So make sure that those images are really different and that there's a definite distinction between those two different parts of the graphic. Now, for the artifact rationale, I'm asking you to suggest what type of artifact you might be creating that will be embedded in the final research project. Again, this might change, it might evolve. Specifically, the content might evolve, but I'd like you to try to at least figure out what type of artifact you're really most interested in creating. For example, if you're more of an auditory music person, you might decide you want to create some kind of music track that represents the issues that you're researching this semester. You probably want to go ahead and describe what that music might be, what genre, but then if you change your mind later, you might switch the genre to something else, even though you're still doing music. Likewise, if you're a more visual person and you want to create a type of collage, the content of the collage might change, but you're probably going to still keep the concept of the collage. So go ahead and figure out what type of artifact you're going to do, and then describe that artifact in the proposal so that you have some sense of direction and purpose for what type of artifact you're going to make eventually. So I have the example here. I would like to create a digital collage that shows characters from different films that deal with economics. So I've named specifically, it's not a paper collage, it's a digital collage. I want to show how wealth and poverty are portrayed over time through the different types of characters that are shown. I think a visual collage will help my audience understand how economics have been portrayed in films and how the economic condition of characters has been used for entertainment while ignoring the actual realities of people's struggles. So I have reasons, right? My purpose for this part of the proposal is to explain why did I choose that particular type of artifact. Well, in this case, it's because I want to give people the visual of the actual images that I'm talking about in my research project. So I'm going to take those images, perhaps through screen capture, and put those into a digital collage so that when people read my research project, they have those images right there in front of them so that they can see that. And that makes my overall argument and my contribution to the conversation about the topic more relevant and more powerful because they have that right there in front of them. So my hope then, going back to my example, is that showing this visually will make people more critical viewers of films where a character's economic status is used as a plot point. So I'm going to describe my expectations. This is how the artifact relates to research. It's going to teach my viewers about the issue. That's what I'm looking for in this section of the body. I want you to name that artifact, describe what it's going to look like or sound like, explain why you're choosing that particular type of artifact, and what contribution it's going to have to your research project overall. For the artifact rationale, you're going to be speaking or showing what type of artifact you want to create for the final research project. So again, as a reminder, the artifact is what is embedded within the actual essay, showing something that is your contribution to the conversation. So you need to decide what type of artifact you're going to create for the proposal. You need to have that in mind already, and then you're going to say or show an example of what that would be. So you're also going to describe why you think that type of artifact will be the best type to make an argument about your particular issue, and expectations for how the artifact will teach your readers about this issue that you're researching within the pop culture form that you've chosen. So if you're doing the audio visual, you're just going to, again, cue the reader through saying, now I want to talk about my artifact, or using a title card, and you'll describe that rationale. So what type, why have you chosen it, and what do you think it will teach people? For the graphic, again, separating out a distinct area, choosing images or words. Particularly in this case, you might want to choose words so that you say collage and explaining why, and just kind of some short buzzwords, because the artifact itself would be repeated, right, if you created it now. You don't want to create it now. You're going to create it later after you've completed your research. So think in terms here of what images, if they can be concise, or what words could represent the type of artifact, why you think that artifact is best, and what you plan to teach your readers through the use of that artifact. So make sure that you have a clear sense, again, of what you want to contribute in your final project to the conversation on your topic through the creation of this artifact. After you've finished with the body, you're going to finish the proposal with a conclusion that corresponds to the what's next section of the research project. So looking back at that research project overview, you'll see that the final paper has a section at the end called What's Next. The proposal is going to anticipate what you think you're going to find to put in that What's Next section. It is really about describing your research implications. This is where you're going to describe why your research is important, what kind of impact it's going to have on the conversation, and really describing your argument and your perspective as you add into this conversation on your topic. So in the proposal, you need to think about, what do you think will be the most important thing for your audience to learn or to understand? And what do you expect to argue or to learn after you've completed the research process? This is also the section where you're going to include a working thesis statement. The thesis, again, can be several sentences, or it could possibly even be a paragraph, and it can also change as you conduct research. So you're not committed to this thesis sentence in the proposal. However, every proposal should have a strong, clear statement of what you're expecting to learn and what you want to argue as a result of the research conducted. So you can use one of the working thesis models from the Week 8 discussion, or you can revise those models if you've got some good feedback, blend them together, or you can just rewrite them completely. But I hope that you'll be able to draw on what you used in our discussion and use that kind of model for the final paper and for the proposal as well. So let's look at an example. If you look at the annotations here, you're going to see three major things that I'm doing in this concluding paragraph. First, I have that thesis paragraph or sentence that then moves into a paragraph of argument, which becomes a sort of thesis paragraph. And I've used the working thesis model correcting misinterpretations, which I've actually taken from the previous lecture, just to provide some consistency as we work through this example. I'm also going to explain the problem and then explain how my research provides a type of solution. This is what I mean by implications. I'm showing what is the result of my research, what is going to be my contribution. And it's really answering this question of, why am I doing this, and so what? Who cares? What are the implications about it? How is it really going to contribute or change the conversation? That's part of my argument, and that's part of my overall thesis. But it can be separate from the actual thesis sentence where I'm summing up that argument. But I've created this sort of paragraph because it all goes together. I'm also going to be describing what the next step is in the conversation. So again, answering that question of what's next, projecting into the future and making suggestions about how to continue solving this problem. So let's look more closely at the example. Here's my thesis sentence from the previous lecture that I'm going to turn into the guiding idea of this paragraph. Although most people assume that popular films do not address economic inequality, my project will show that many films use this issue as a point of conflict and, surprisingly, as a source of entertainment. Often the entertaining elements of the films outweigh any type of social commentary that they might have. My research will inform my readers about how films have contributed to a rags to riches narrative that obscures the real struggles people experience. I recognize that the film industry exists to make a profit, but I believe that they should create films that portray people's economic conditions more accurately. My research will ask readers to become more critical viewers and to advocate for better representations of economics in films. So I have here really several different things that are happening. The correcting misinterpretations combined with some filling the gap, combined with some modification. Here's what needs to happen next. I haven't labeled all of those, but if you're familiar with the thesis sentences, you should hear all of those things happening. And you can do that. You can blend together the different ways or different models of making an argument. Or you can just focus on one, which is perfectly fine. But the main thing I want to see in this section is that statement of argument, your implications or your reasons why you're doing this, and then describing what you think that next step will be. This is a real short synopsis of what will be in that what's next section in the conclusion of the final research project. And finally, if you're doing the non-traditional proposal, you're still going to include the same information in the concluding section of the audio-visual or the graphic. So if you're coming to the end of the audio-visual, you want to prepare your listeners for the fact that it's going to be the end. So you want to signal that with saying something like in conclusion or in summary, or you can have a title card that says what's next or conclusion. You need to explain the problem or what's at stake for your research topic. So why did you pick this is in the rationale. When you get to the end, you're going to explain here's what's really at the heart of this issue. It's what you want to make your argument about. Then you're going to also be stating your working thesis, and you need to cue the reader for that, or the listener for that, so that there's a definite sense of where you're saying, here's my thesis. You can just even say that straight out. My working thesis at this point is, or I plan to argue this. I might end up changing my mind, but this is my argument at this point. You also need to explain how your research will provide a solution to the problem that you identified. So these are your implications. You want to say to your listener, I think by the end of the research, here are the things that I think can be changed or that should be changed in order for us to move forward with this topic. The implications of my project will be these things. And you want to describe what those next steps in the conversation on your topic will be. And again, as a reminder, as I mentioned before, your recording really needs to be coherent and organized. So make sure you have those talking points in front of you before you start recording. Make sure that you hit every highlight, that you're really thinking through how you're going to transition your listener from beginning to end. And then you'll just turn in that set of notes to me with the final project or proposal submission so that way I don't miss anything that you want me to hear. So please be aware of that as you're finishing up your draft, that you need to have a coherent audio or visual that makes sense from beginning to end. And you need to play it through and listen back for those talking points, making sure that you're thinking through every step and that you haven't overlooked anything. For the graphic, for the concluding part, I really recommend putting something that says like what's next, or something that cues the reader that this is the final piece of the puzzle. So if you're doing a PowerPoint, obviously this would be your last slide, but if you're doing something like a poster presentation, you might put that at the bottom corner, so that way people's eye goes everywhere else on the poster, and then they end up at the bottom, and that's the end of the project. So think in terms of design. How are you moving people through the visual that you've created, through that graphic, drawing their eye from one place to the next place, and then having them end in a certain location? So you're going to make sure that you're choosing images or words that represent that problem or what's at stake for your topic. Then you're going to take those images or words and represent a solution to the problem or implications. So how are you going to solve this? What is really going to happen next? What do you think should be that next step? You do need to state the thesis sentence in words. So find room on your graphic to make sure that that thesis sentence is highlighted in some way. It must be in words. It can't be symbolic, although the rest of the graphic might be symbolic instead. Images and words should also represent what the next steps in the conversation would be. So think through, where do you want to go? What do you want people to learn? What's the takeaway? How are you going to show something that is in terms of your argument and in terms of change? So as I mentioned before, the images need to be conveying clearly what you mean. So that's why it's so important to have that symbolism translated so that I don't miss and your viewer doesn't miss any of the significance of what those images are for you. So make sure that each one is described and that there's no confusion about what those images are saying in terms of the composition that you're creating here. So whatever type of proposal that you've chosen to do, make sure that you have a clear understanding of the expectations for how to write each part step by step. I recommend that you go back through and you look at these examples, because even if you're not writing the traditional proposal, the structure and what needs to be included will be the same. You're just composing a different style of presentation to influence and affect your viewer, your listener, your audience. But the content needs to be coherent, and the actual content that needs to go into each type of composition doesn't change. So make sure you have a clear understanding of each separate section of the proposal and what needs to be in each part and how you're going to move your viewer, your reader, your listener through each of these parts to the conclusion that you want them to get. Thanks.